And during the few moments that we have left, we want to talk right down to earth in a language that everybody here can easily understand.
Get your gun.
Yo, it's a Samurai Showdown.
We will defend these police officers.
Listen to police officers' commands, listen to what we tell you, and just stop. The nation needs to realize that when we tell you to do something, do it. And if you're wrong, you're wrong. If you're right, then the courts will figure it out.
We don't get to take the law, we enforce it. But at the end of the day, each and every member should go home safe. Sometimes the use of force is necessary. You need to comply with the police officer, the way the system was meant to be. Comply with the orders of police officers. Resisting arrest is a...
Nonpartisan Liberty for All. I'm your host, Dave Bourne, and it is January 14th, 2016. I was going to start out with a verse from NWA, but I changed my mind last minute. That's probably why I silenced for a second. I'm like, am I going to go with this? Am I going to go with that? So I decided not to, but fuck the police anyway. But tonight we have an interesting show for you. But thank you for tuning in to Nonpartisan Liberty for All. We're on weeknights, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at 7 o'clock Pacific, 10 o'clock Eastern, and you can listen live on Spreaker.com and nonpartisanlibertyforall.com. It's like /live something. You can just go to the website and it's right there. And you can listen to the archives now on Spreaker, YouTube, Twitter, and SoundCloud, as well as Tumblr, but it's TUMBL. I don't know. There's a bunch of applications on it, too, and I don't know enough about it, to be honest. People are probably laughing at me. Anyway, but you can listen to all the archives immediately after the show on any of those applications. We promote the ideas of true freedom and liberty, meaning being able to do whatever you want as long as you respect the freedom of others and don't directly interfere with their freedom, as well as exposing government for what it is, a mafia based on extortion that rules without consent by threat of force and violence. So, as I mentioned today, we have an interesting show for you. Finally, the making of a murderer and the injustice system. I've talked about the injustice system before, but not using an example like this to be able to show a lot of the issues within it. I originally scheduled the show for Tuesday, and I scheduled it for Friday, so that's why I'm like, well, finally, we're going to do it today. And I had even said yesterday we're going to do it Friday, but I thought it'd be better to do it today. Plus, the show I had scheduled for today, I wasn't really prepared for, as we're going to do a show on the importance of hackers. And that was the show that was scheduled originally for today, but I need to do some more research on that because I had seen a documentary about a few cases involving hacktivists, not just hackers in general, but I'd seen some cases, and the damage, or I would say, I wouldn't call it damage, but what hackers or hacktivists can do to help promote freedom and liberty is very important, and it's beyond a lot of things. It's probably one of the most important because you don't need a lot of people or a lot of things to do it. I mean, you have a couple of people that know what they're doing, and you can change things quick and easily. You can get something out there. You can not necessarily change things, but at least you can make an impact a lot quicker and immediately. So I think that's something I don't know a lot about. I've heard about hackers and them being prosecuted, the government really going after them, because those are the people they're really going after, more than people that speak out. They're going after people that are actually exposing them and have the power to expose them. Now, I can get up here and say whatever I want and say I read this fucking document, but I can't hack into a computer and then give you all that information. And they are a lot more dangerous to the government and their secrecy. And I mean that in a positive way, that they're dangerous to the government, because what hacktivists are doing, and there's a difference between hacktivists and hackers. Hackers, just regular hackers, they might be trying to rob somebody or steal something or something to that effect. Hacktivists are people that are activists that happen to be hackers, and they use their hacking ability to express their activism through hacking, just like I express it through a radio show. So, but they definitely make a lot bigger impact than me. So, that will be an important show. So I definitely need to do some more research before I do a show on hacktivists. I have it scheduled for next week, but I may even push that back because I want that to be something that people learn more about. It's not really, they try to hide it. And I don't mean the hacktivists try to hide it. I mean the media tries to hide it. You have these people that are going to jail for 10, 20 years for hacking into ridiculous websites, or hacking into important websites but not doing anything, or making data available that's already available. It's just, it's ridiculous. And that, I think, is the government's main focus, is hacktivists, and then second would be whistleblowers in the media, because the whistleblowers have access to that information too. And then you have the media that is distributing that information. So say you have, I think the most dangerous would be obviously somebody like Edward Snowden, who's already in there, who works for the government, a whistleblower. Then from him, you'd have the newspaper people that put it out there, that disseminate that information. And I think it would be the same with hacktivists, that they're able to get similar information, and if they can get it out there to news outlets or create their own, then that's definitely something that the government does not want. They don't want you to know the secret stuff that they're doing, because then that's proof. The thing is that I think we pretty much, not we collectively as a country, but we, I would like to think, and I could be wrong, but I know a lot of the stuff, or I imagine that a lot of the stuff that I think is true, but I can't really prove it to anybody. There's some stuff I can through government documents that they release, because there's a lot of shit that they just release on their own. They declassify, and it's just out there for people, and nobody pays attention. But no one seems to be, or not enough people seem to be paying attention to hacktivists. My only thing is that some of them are more leftist and about Occupy Wall Street and things like that, as opposed to just true freedom and liberty. That's where I guess I would differ with Some of them, not all of them, but they're still doing a lot of positive things, and I applaud that. So I wish I knew somebody personally that would be willing to come on and talk about it, or, you know, not talk about, well, I did this or I did that, but just talk about that was an expert on hacktivism or knew a lot of people that were hacktivists or something like that. Not that actually even did it themselves, but if I could do it, I would. And I'll say that right now. If I could, if I had the abilities, if I had the skills to hack into computers, that's probably what I'd do. And then I'd release shit through website and radio show and all of that. Now, a lot of the stuff. See, here's the problem. Is that even the things that people don't believe anyway, but that have been declassified, I've talked about them tons of times, and people don't seem to care about those. And I'm not just saying me. If like somebody on a big media station talks about them, people don't seem to care. So if a hacktivist says, hey, you know, I got all this data, whatever, same thing. People don't seem to care. I mean, what's the difference? They got more classified data than what got released, but you had Bradley Manning or Chelsea Manning release all that information and get posted on WikiLeaks. You had Snowden, and the effects that you would think it would have, I don't think it had nearly the effect that it should have. And that's why I think a lot of these hacktivists, they end up going to jail for years and years, because nobody cares. No one's paying attention. Nobody's just realizing what they're doing and how important what they do is, and how important it is that these are the people that could join the NSA or the FBI or any of these agencies if they wanted to. But instead, they take their skills and use them for good instead of evil. That's what I would say. So we need more people to go that direction. The unfortunate difference is you're not going to get the money that, you know, and I think a lot of them don't give a fuck about money. They care more about freedom, and I agree. But they could, you know, get a 6-figure paying job probably doing what they do and with the skills they have. I mean, I have limited. I mean, I'd like to think that if I applied myself and studied and I could learn coding and things like that, where just, you know, on a very small basis, I learned SQL, which is basically just pulling its code to pull data out of a database, really. I mean, you can write programs with it too, but I'm not even that good at it that I can write like programs with SQL. So I'm like on the bottom of the ladder when it comes to that. But I'm also, you know, 99% self-taught too. So meaning, you know, I just had resources to ask questions or went in a manual. So I wanted to learn more about it, and it's not something I should be talking about like, hey, I want to learn how to hack into government websites, but it's not something that at this point in my life that I have the time, or I don't even know, you know, if I was like 20 years old, I could probably learn it no problem, but now who knows. So anyway, I didn't want it to turn it into a big thing, but I will be doing a show on hacktivists, and I want to really focus on how important what they're doing is and how they're going to jail, and not just necessarily hacktivists, but also people that are doing things on the internet that are being attacked by the U.S. government and other governments as well, like the Silk Road and what happened with that. The Silk Road was a website that it was mainly drugs, but it had like legal stuff as well, and it was safer because everybody was anonymous. You rated people like eBay, and you could buy drugs on there and just have them sent to you, and you'd buy them in Bitcoin, and nobody would know who you were, and nobody would get killed or hurt, or there'd be no violence involved. But the U.S. government is a bunch of fucking morons, and we'll see more of that tonight when I start talking about tonight's topic. So that should be next week, but I might push it back another week just to get some more information. It depends how much time I have to get more information. But I did get a lot of information from this documentary. I mean, my show is not something a show where I'm going to get into real detail. I mean, then I could go on forever. I mean, in 3 hours, I can cover a topic and, cover some other stuff as well, only to a certain extent. So I might just review the documentary, maybe look at some articles and some other stuff, and, just present more of a high level show about hacktivists, because I think it's something that's important and people need to be aware of, and that it's a positive thing, and that I think that is a huge part of the future if we want any type of freedom, because we got to be able to use the same technology against the government that they're using against us. So anyway, that was my little thing on hacktivism that, again, is scheduled for next week, but I may change that. So just check your local nonpartisan Liberty for All pages to find out the specific day and time. And I create an event for every single show, and what I'm trying to remember to do is make sure I post that event on, well, if I create it at a Nonpartisan Liberty for All. So you should be able to find all the events on the Nonpartisan Liberty for All Facebook, no matter what, if you like the page or not. So, because I create them out of there on purpose, so everyone will have access to them. I can't invite everybody that likes that page, but they'll be posted there, so you can look at the events on Nonpartisan Liberty for All, the Facebook page. So anyway, tonight we're going to talk all about, and I don't know if I would have covered this if I knew how big it got. I didn't realize that this has become like a huge fucking thing. And I had seen it on Netflix. I mentioned this. I've seen it on Netflix before, and I thought it was about like fucking murderers and how somebody becomes a murderer, like the analysis of a psychopath or something. And I'm like, I don't want to watch that shit. So that's what I thought it was. And then I had found out, my fiance was like, well, let's watch this. And it's about, something else or whatever. So I'm like, all right. So I watched it, and it was totally different than what I thought it was going to be. But I didn't know how huge it got. When I started doing research on it, it's been on every, CNN talked about it, and Fox, and all the shows that cover crimes. What's her name? Who's a annoying bitch who came out and actually badmouthed it. What's that lady's name? Nancy Grace. And we'll play a clip with Nancy Grace, who she didn't badmouth it to say that Well, actually, she kind of did, because she said that he's guilty and the show makes him look innocent and whatever. But they keep saying, well, they left stuff out. But we'll get to the stuff that they left out, and it doesn't really make much of a difference, to be honest. So I don't know what the fuck they're talking about. But anyway, even though it's all over government media, you are not going to get the same take on it that you're going to get from me at all, trust me. And especially in what I think happened. And also, the other thing is my opinion of the injustice system, where they support it. Most of the people speaking upon it are lawyers, and they support the system and all this and that. And they think that, well, a jury said this, so whatever. And or some people have come out and said, well, I think he's not guilty. And you know, you've had all different kinds of opinions, but I don't think you're going to have any opinion like mine, to be honest. And that's not a like bragging thing. It's just, I'm not a lawyer. I almost went to law school. I looked into it, but even still, I don't believe in government neither. So there you go. I don't believe in the injustice system. They believe in the system, and they realize it has flaws. I don't think that the system just has flaws. I think the whole system has to go and does not work and never did in the first place. So I'm not the type of person who has a problem with, well, the system went in this direction. No, I think the creation of the system, and you can look at a lot of this shit, was fucked up in the first place and gave, you know, starting with giving way too much power to judges, first of all. And that was how it always has been. It has always given the power, that amount of power to judges. That just didn't happen in the past couple of years. But anyway, just to give a summary, and then we'll get into the detail of a lot of things in the case, as well as how the fucked up judicial system affected a lot of things. And also how, this is the other thing that I don't hear anybody really talking about, is that this is more the norm to me, at least not this specific case. I mean, granted, this case is kind of unique, and I think you have to admit that. But as far as people getting screwed over by the system, that happens all the time. So I got these statistics from 2010. So first of all, the total charges in 2010 were 98,311. And I think this is just based on how states report. So it could be off, because that seems like it should be way more than that. But it does say nationwide. But again, this was 6 years ago, or about 5 probably, because they probably put it together, as of after December of 2010. But first of all, you want to know how many fucking people actually go to trial? And I've talked about this before. It's like 95%. It's ridiculous. They don't want you to go to trial. So out of all the people that went to trial, and let me try to do this in my head here, 300 minus 14, so 2366 minus 14 is 52. 2352 was the amount of cases that went to trial out of 98,311. 2,352. And out of those 2,352, you know how many were acquitted? 13%. 286. Now, you could tell me one or two things. You could say that the fucking legal system is so great, that they're so good at what they do, meaning that they're just the judges and the prosecutors and the police, they never make any mistakes. They're perfect in everything they do, obviously, because only 13% was actually acquitted by a jury. And that even surprises me as high. And that's 2010. I'm sure that has gone down. Juries seem like robots. The judge says, gives them the instructions, and usually they vote guilty after that. But that's a lot of cases that go to a jury and they're found not guilty. No, it doesn't have judges. So this may be, it didn't say this, but this could be only like serious crimes, because like in my case, it was a minor misdemeanor and I didn't get a jury. I got a judge, a bench trial. But there were a couple of articles I had also brought up, and that's where, I got this from. It's funny, though, that on the, uscourts.gov, of course, they try to make it sound all nice and how great the injustice system is, but they don't give any statistics. They may somewhere, and maybe I just couldn't find them, but, it talks about the judicial process and the burden of proof. Oh, the burden of proof is on the government, and the pretrial and the trial and the sentencing, and it puts it into this like, oh, yeah, it's fair, and it's just a bunch of shit. There is statistic and reports. I didn't get a chance to go through all of these, unfortunately, but at some point I should, because these are all the government's facts and figures, but it's all like different courts. I'd have to find criminal. Oh, there we go. Criminal cases and defendants filed. So at some point I'll have to do a show on these, because it will be something, trust me, that will take a long time to put together. This was kind of a last minute thing where I spent the majority of time on the putting together all the facts in the case and all of that stuff and going through all that, as opposed to looking at statistics regarding the legal system. But I did find that one that I brought up about, the majority of them, one, I mentioned this before, something like 95 to 97% don't even go to trial. And then on top of that, of course, you have the issue of most people that go to trial are found guilty. So sounds like a pretty rigged fucking system to me. And I wonder about, so the statistics I gave for 2010, looking at that, I wonder, now my screen's all fucked up because it's like splitting my screen and giving me the other page. Okay, there we go. I wonder, based on, what type of people. So did the people that got off, were they, how much did they pay for their lawyer? Were they middle-class people? Were they rich people? Were they somebody who was considered important to the community? Usually those cases, though, will probably get dropped before that, but maybe not. But you have that, too. I mean, justice costs a lot of fucking money. So in this case, I think it was, I know he ended up getting $400,000, but I don't think he spent the whole $400,000. But it was something like $200,000 or $300,000 on for a murder case. So if you want some really good lawyers in a murder trial, you're talking about in the $100,000s. So what does that mean? Because you're poor and you're accused of murder? I mean, I'm not poor, but I couldn't afford a great defense in a murder trial. I mean, I can't afford $100,000 to pay to a fucking lawyer. Actually, it costs more than that if you want a, better attorney. I think OJ paid millions in his case. So justice is it's very subjective, and it costs a lot of money. But with that introduction being said regarding how big this case was, like I said, I try to stay away from government media, so that's why it's also not something I was looking for until I was going to do it on the show anyway. So that's why I didn't know that it was as big as it was. But you'll definitely get, I think, something out of it, out of the show and out of my opinion. You might not agree with me, but especially if you haven't seen it, or even if you have seen it, I think you'll get more out of it than you would from some government media broadcast where they rush through it and talk a bunch of shit. So I'll start with the summary of what happened for those who don't know. So Netflix they're doing original series now, as is Amazon. They're doing original series. I actually did a show on the man in the Iron Castle, and that's where the Japanese and the Germans win World War II, and they have control of the U.S. And I suggest you watch that as well if you have Amazon Prime, or even if you don't, you can pay for it, I guess. But Netflix is doing a lot of its original series that are getting a lot of attention. Like, I think the Orange is the New Black is in a Netflix original series as well. But this is their first season. I'm assuming they'll do multiple seasons with different cases. But in this case, you had a man, Steve Avery, and he was arrested initially at the age of 23. He was arrested for sexual assault and battery on a woman at I want to say beach, but do they have beaches in Wisconsin? It doesn't touch the ocean. It must be a lake that's like a beach type. If you've been to a lake, there's sand. It looks like a beach. So he was arrested, charged with that. Now, before that happened, he had an issue with his cousin who was married to a cop, and she was friends with other cops on the force as well, and had badmouthed him and things like that. So, and I'll get to some other stuff in his past that we'll start out with. But before I get to that, I just want to give a summary on the whole thing, so at least you know kind of what I'm going to go through. So he was arrested for that. I don't know how many years he actually got in jail, but at the age of 23, he was sentenced to at least over 20 years or something like that. Now, I think he could have got parole, but he would never admit his guilt. He maintains his innocence. And the picture actually, it seemed like the cops had something against him. And the picture that was drawn, the mugshot. So when they talk to the victim and they describe, the sketch artist. And the guy who did it, I don't think was a sketch artist. I think he was just a cop. But it looked like he just took Avery's mugshot from another crime and just, copied it. So it pretty much looked like they were, because he ended up in the lineup, that they had something against him. And then he was identified as the person who did it, maintained his innocence for 18 years. Then finally they came up with as things advanced, a DNA test that was not only able to disqualify him, but to match the person that they thought it was all along, because there was a guy who was a sex offender that was actually being was being surveilled at the time. And I guess at the moment that happened, the cops took the surveillance off because they had to do something else, and they weren't there when it had happened. So there was some negligence, though, in the case on the side of the cops, where they had some evidence that it might be him, and they got a call from another police department saying that, yeah, we have this guy who said there's an innocent guy in jail for something that he did over there, and I'll get into more detail later. So anyway, so he gets released. He goes to sue. Obviously, he loses 18 years of his life. He sues for $36 million. For some reason, the county and possibly the actual some of the officers involved are going to be held liable for the suit. Now, that I still don't understand, but it was something with the insurance, I guess, where they weren't going to cover it because of something. I'm still not clear why, but it would bankrupt, obviously, the county. And this is in Mariwaka County or Maricopa. It's Mariwaka or something. I can't pronounce it. I have it spelled, but I kept getting it wrong earlier. So in Wisconsin. And they lived in a place called, I think it was Two Rivers. Either Two Rivers or, I know there's Three Rivers Stadium in Pittsburgh, which is on the coast of Wisconsin. And his family had owned this auto salvage place where they brought, I guess, I don't know exactly what they did, fix up cars, I would think, or it was almost like a junkyard, half, maybe fix up the cars and sell them. They really didn't get into what they did with their business, but that's what it was. It was an auto salvage place, and it was a family business, and they had all lived on the land in like a trailer. It was like half trailer park. They definitely were, and I'm not trying to be derogatory or arrogant or sitting on my high horse, but I mean they were more they were kind of like a redneck kind of family, to be honest, and a lot of them had low IQs. He had an IQ of 70, and we'll get to some other people in this family later in the show. But anyway, so the last deposition was given, I believe, October 11th, 2005. So 3 weeks later, he is arrested and charged with murder. A woman had come to take a picture of a car for Auto Trader, and the car was, ended up there. There was blood in the car. There was, I don't want to go into too many details right now because I'm going to go through them. But so he ended up being arrested. He claimed that he was innocent, that he was framed, that it had something to do with the fact that he was suing for $36 million. So he ended up, while he was in jail, he settled because he needed money for a lawyer. That's how he could afford those lawyers. Also, his nephew got mixed in, and his nephew wasn't the smartest person in the world, was about 16, and they kind of manipulated him into basically confessing. If he didn't say anything, this is the perfect example of why not to say anything to a cop, but if he didn't say anything, he'd be fine right now. So he got scared, and we'll get into the details of what I believe happened there. So anyway, he had been charged with the crime. His nephew was also charged with the crime. They went to trial. They were both found guilty. And there was some evidence and reasons why. But most of the people that have seen the series are now, the case is coming up again. He's getting free lawyers. People think he's innocent. Now, there's some people that, of course, coming out and saying he's not, like the district attorney. The district attorney actually had a scandal after the fact where he was sexting a girl who was a victim. So he was prosecuting her, whoever assaulted her. And I don't know if I know she was beaten, but she might have been raped as well. And he's sexting her all this fucked up shit. They actually went into detail in the show about all the fucked up stuff that he was sexting her. And I think he ended up finally resigning. He's a douchebag. And I don't know that he didn't think that they were innocent as well. The whole thing is just, it seems like a small town. I guess there were 30,000 people in the county, and these are police, and we haven't gone into a lot recently about police just because I got tired of the same story over and over and over again. But I got to get back to that because police are still killing people all the time, still violating their rights and doing all the stuff that they're doing. So I've kind of gotten away from that a little, but it's definitely something I need to get back to and make sure that people know what's going on, that nothing's changed. It's the same stuff. It's almost like we accept it. So anyway, I'm going to go through the case in detail with my comments as far as what I think, and then go through the judicial system, how it relates to not only this case, but issues with it in general and how fucked up it is. And then what I think really had happened. And then we have clips as well. I had already said at the beginning how many cases actually go to trial as of 2010 numbers, and I'm sure they're worse now. And that right there tells you something. If people are pleading out all the time, is it that the police are just that good and everybody's guilty? No, that's not what it is. It's that the tactics they use, the way they stack charges, which, you know, you do one thing, they come up with all these charges so they know they can get you on one. They try to scare the shit out of people. They penalize people for taking a case to trial. I took my case to trial. Now, I was only facing 6 months in jail, but I was like, I didn't do anything. There's no way I'm going to plead out. That's ridiculous. And, of course, they gave me a worse punishment than the deals that they offer. Ultimately, the courts want to convict everybody. The judges, the prosecutors. It even seems like, to an extent, the juries, that if you're charged with a crime, they want a conviction. It's about the numbers. It doesn't matter if you're guilty or innocent. It's irrelevant. So, for the most part, they want to convict you. Unless there's something like you have it on video, and even then, you still might not get off. But, you know, they'll throw it out. But they're all about their records, their win and loss records, and just convictions and things like that. So, Steven Avery, before he went to jail the first time, he did get in some trouble. And one of the things that is disturbing to me is he burned the family cat. Now, he says that he threw a cat over the fire or something and it got burnt up. But what I had heard someplace else from another source in doing my research is that he just lit the cat on fire. The other thing was that his ex-fiance, who I think is a fucking liar because now she totally turned around. She's in the series. She turned around and now she's saying totally the opposite, that he would beat her and that their relationship was bad and she thinks he's guilty. But, of course, she wasn't saying any of that when it was going on, and she could have easily left. I mean, he was in jail. I don't know why she would want to stay with him while he's in jail, and he can't do anything to her, and he wasn't getting out anytime soon. So, I saw the interview with her, at least the first interview with her, so I'm sure there'll be more to come, but she totally sounds like a liar and totally different to what she was saying previously. So there were some allegations of rape, but it was more rumors. They never went to court. He was never arrested, nothing, never charged with anything, never summoned. So you can't really take that as anything, to be honest. Just because, maybe he was pushy with girls where, trying to get them to have sex with him or something along those lines. But there was nothing that came out of that. Nothing that, like I said, it wasn't even an arrest. It wasn't like he was arrested and found not guilty, or they investigated it and found there's not enough evidence. It was just like rumors around town. That's all that was. That wasn't in the video, but I had got that from another source. But that, again, I would pretty much throw that out because of the fact that it was never even investigated. So it was just kind of rumors around town. So the other thing, he was arrested, and I think there were two things he was arrested for that I'm aware of. It was the cat, which is pretty bad. You think of somebody burning up a cat. That really, as somebody who's loves cats, or loves certain cats anyway. I love my cats because they're really friendly and they're like dogs. I don't love everybody else's cats. However, I do not want to see any animals getting hurt in any way, especially something like that. So I had to, when I heard that, because initially he said, and it said this in the documentary, that they made it out more that, well, he was a young kid and he threw the cat over the fire. But then I had heard that he actually put gasoline on the cat and lit it up. So I don't know which is true, but it's pretty bad either way. So he was arrested for that. And then his cousin was saying, and it sounded like from the documentary, that the guy who really committed the offense, that he was in jail for 18 years and got released, was the guy who was doing this. His cousin was spreading rumors that he was outside, like masturbating in front of people and standing outside his house with his penis out or something. And then she kind of changed her story in her interview. She said, well, he was out with his penis out. And then really it got down to, well, he had sex with his wife on the lawn and people could see. And I don't really look at that as a big, so what? The having sex with your wife on the lawn. I mean, I guess some people are exhibitionists. I don't think it's a big deal. I guess it depends how much they showed, but either way, I mean, so whatever. So she was spreading rumors about him. So he kind of ran her off the road. It wasn't as bad as when they say run her off the road. It wasn't as bad as that sounds, but, she was fine. she didn't get hurt or anything. And I think it was just him and her on the road. And he pulled out a gun. He claims the gun was not loaded, though. So it looked like he was just trying to scare her and to stop talking about him. But as I said, he has an IQ of 70, at least when he was tested, I think when he was younger, which is borderline retarded. Although he doesn't come off as stupid as his nephew does, when we'll talk about him later. But I don't think he comes off that he has an IQ of 70, because I think 60 is considered retarded. But again, I think that's the end of retarded. You know what I mean? Like, retarded is really like 30 or something, and 60 would be like the end point. So he's not retarded, but he's not too smart. So he had done that. He, I believe, went to jail for that. That's where they had the mug shot. And I believe at the time he was married. He had a bunch of kids, worked at the salvage yard that his parents owned, and lived essentially in a kind of trailer park type atmosphere where the salvage yard was. So right after that happened was when this incident of a woman getting beaten, and she wasn't raped, but she was sexually assaulted. So he didn't penetrate her, but I believe they were, because what got him off was a pubic hair. So I believe, he got her panties off and everything. He just, for whatever reason, wasn't lucky for her, wasn't able to penetrate her. So she was, they showed pictures. She was beaten. She was her family was important in town. They owned a business. They were considered well-respected people. And of course, the Avery family was considered probably like white trash. So what they did in that case, though, is went right to him. Essentially, based on the description, they brought him in right away for a lineup. It really does look like, if you see, because they had showed it, if you look at his mugshot that they had from when they did arrest him and compared it to the sketch that they made, it looked exactly like it. It really did. There's no doubt in my mind that they copied it. So then you had his cousin's husband who worked for the same sheriff's department. You had her best friend, his cousin's best friend, worked for the sheriff's department. They definitely had something against him. So at the age of 23 in 1985, I'm not sure how many kids he had. I think he had at least like 4 or something. He was married. He went to jail. I'm not sure on the exact sentence, but what they were saying was that they will not parole you unless you apologize and admit your guilt. And he would not admit his guilt because he's like, I didn't do this. I'm not going to admit that I'm guilty, and hopefully something will happen that will get me out of here. So they were able to, as DNA testing continued to advance and the technology continued to advance, and anyone who watched any of the OJ trial, and I know actually that's been over 20 years now, so I don't know if that many people in the audience actually watched it. I remember at the time I saw a lot of it, and I remember my father was like watching the whole fucking trial. So I saw a lot of the OJ trial, actually. That went on forever. It seemed like it went on forever. I don't know how long it actually went on for, but it was on Court TV, and it was on for a while. But there was something that they looked at in 94 or 95, and that wasn't enough. But I guess in 2003, Now, I don't know if this was because of an advancement, because I didn't think there was much that advanced between, 95 and 2003. I knew that now they had DNA evidence, and I wasn't following it neither. So it wouldn't be something that I would be aware of that, oh, well, there's new DNA technology. I just know that they have DNA evidence. So what they were able to do, and he was lucky, they were able to take one pubic hair. That was the only one, because there was another one that didn't have a root, and then the rest of them were hers. So I guess if they don't have the root now, at least in 2003, I don't know about now, which is an interesting thing to know, because make sure you don't ever leave... Because I thought about that. I'm like, how come so much more people aren't getting caught for crimes? Because people shed hair all the time. And maybe if they don't have the root of the hair, or maybe at least back then, maybe now, I don't know. But they had one pubic hair that totally eliminated him. And not only did it eliminate him, it matched the other guy that was being surveilled. So there was a guy in 85 who was a sex offender. They were surveilling him. For whatever reason, they had something else they had to tend to. So they weren't there when that assault and attempted rape took place. But in, I believe, 95 or 96, he said he was arrested in another county. And he told that county and said, well, there's some other guy in jail for something I did. And they got a call from a police detective in that county, and they didn't do anything about it. What was funny was they wrote a report after they released him, or the day, to try to cover their asses. So they knew that they were in some trouble. Also, in the actual case file on Steven Avery, they had something on this guy, and I can't remember his full name. It was Glenn something. So there were a lot of things about this case that they really just said, hey, we got our guy. This is who's going down for this, and we don't really give a fuck, with all the issues with his cousin and her husband and her friends in the department, and also the other issues he had in the past, getting arrested, and as far as his family and his family name. So they wanted him for that crime, and they didn't really give a fuck. So they ignored the call. But then, of course, after this evidence came out, they wrote something up, which makes them look worse. I think they would have been better off if they didn't write anything up and said, oh, well, I transferred the call to somebody else. I thought they did it, and just made it into more of a confusion more than, oh, look, we're covering our ass. So in 2003, he was released because of this DNA evidence. And I'm assuming the actual suspect was charged with the crime. I think he was already in jail, because the other thing was he raped, I think, at least 2 women, if not more, 2 that they know about, because this guy was out on the street instead of getting the right guy for the crime. So the lawsuit wasn't only about the fact that, okay, they made a mistake. It was more that they ignored a lot of things, and there was negligence in there. So they ended up suing for $36 million. As I had said, I guess this was going on for a while, because in October of 2005, I believe it was October 11th, these the sheriff and the arresting officer and the guy who took the call in 95 or whatever, they were all questioned and gave depositions. So that was the 11th. And then on Halloween was the day of the supposed disappearance of the victim, Teresa. I can't remember her last name off the top of my head right now. So what happened was he was meeting her, I guess and this is why I think they fix up cars and sell them. So they wanted to take pictures for Auto Trader. He had said he dealt with her before. They made a big deal. He did *67 when he called her, which will block your call. Even though on cell phones now you can just block your call anyway. They made a big deal out of that. Like maybe she was trying to avoid his call or something. But maybe he was trying to hurry up and get her down there, and if he kept calling from his number, it would look like he was annoying her. I don't know. I don't see it as any, knowing the other evidence in the case, I don't see that as really anything important to the case there. So what had happened is, I guess she lived with a roommate. She never came home, and there was a weird thing going on with her brother and her roommate. I guess her roommate, I believe, was her ex-boyfriend. So not that that's weird. I've known people that, have broken up and still live together and, as friends. But, excuse me, I'm still kind of getting over my cold here. But one of the weird things was that her brother throughout the whole trial seemed like, one, there was no negative emotion. He always seemed like happy, and I don't know. And he was like the spokesperson for the family. Like he wanted the limelight, but I don't know that there's a lot of relevance in that to the case. But he just, I was watching the thing like, just shut the fuck up, because he would comment on every little thing when it seemed like he didn't know what the hell he was talking about. So I'm not saying, right away you think of, well, who gets thought of first when somebody gets murdered? And it's, unfortunately, and this is kind of fucked up, it's, the ex-boyfriend or family members or people friends, people close to that person. So I'm not saying that I think he did it or anything, but that he was just kind of weird to me through the whole trial, at least what they showed. Now, I don't know, through editing, they can present somebody that way. I don't know how many times he talked, but they showed him enough times, but it could have been one or two interviews that they just cut up. So, but it seemed to be after each part of the trial. But again, that could have been through editing. Anyway, so she disappeared. They had a search party, which was the boyfriend and the brother got together and put together a search party. Somehow they got into her phone and got into her phone records, and they said they just guessed the password, which was weird as well. But they found her car. They went and searched a lot because they knew that she was there to take pictures. So they went and searched the lot there, and found the car almost right away. Now, they showed pictures of this lot, and it's huge. It is really big. And somehow they found it almost right away. And they were communicating with the sheriff's office. So the Manitowoc, I think it's called, county police department or sheriff's office, whatever they go by, they weren't supposed to have anything to do with the case because they were in a lawsuit. So they handed it off to another county. However, in the search and in a whole bunch of things that we'll get to, they were very involved. And it sounded like they were kind of helping with this search because I believe that the woman who found the car called one of the Manitowoc County or Manitoba, or I'm still not clear on the weird names over there, but the that they had essentially called that officer to verify that that was her car. So this one officer, and he may have pointed them in that direction. And so they had found her car. They were like, they showed a picture, boards up against it, and it was just sitting there on the lot. Now, they have a car crusher, so they could have easily crushed the car. The license plate was removed. There were no prints on the car. They did find Teresa, the victim's blood, in the back, like somebody put her in the back. And they found, I think, 3 blood stains of Steven Avery. Now, he had claimed that he was framed and there was blood on file from his previous case. So it would have been easy to take that blood and kind of smear it in the car. It's funny because I had just watched Sons of Anarchy recently, and there was in one season where a cop tried to frame somebody, and they took the hair, for murder, and they took certain hairs and fibers and planted it in the car and some torn clothing and stuff. So, and there was they showed the one mark. I guess he had a cut on his hand, but it was on his left hand, and there was a little mark on the right side next to the steering wheel, and it looked like it could have easily been, put there with like a Q-tip or something like that. But anyway, first they closed down the property for 8 days. Now, I've never heard something like that, and everybody who commented on this, including lawyers, were saying that that's crazy. That how can they close down their property for 8 days? And they had to leave it. So everybody who lived on the property and their business, they had to close for 8 days, which doesn't really make any sense. You would think, okay, first of all, while they're searching it, that you can be there, especially if they're searching the outside. I don't know why you can't be in your house. That doesn't make any sense. And 8 days, who knows what could have been done in that time. So from watching it and from the research I had done, I believe that he was framed. And the evidence that they had, actually, we'll take a quick break because I have a lot of clips to play. And when they come back, we'll talk about the evidence that they had in the case, which really wasn't a lot and was discovered by mysterious circumstances. So first I want to play Nancy Grace, so let me find that. And we'll play a couple other clips as well because that's a short clip. So we'll be right back after this. NonpartisanLibertyForAll.com. If you have any comments, you can call in at 702-470-7664. Again, that's 702-470-7664. Or you can Skype in to the show, username Nonpartisan Liberty for All. Just send a contact request and your name and where you're calling from. And if you're calling in, if you could text first and just text your name and where you're calling from and what you want to talk about. So we'll be right back after this. Again, check us out at nonpartisanlibertyforall.com. That's the wrong one. Here we go. Nancy Grace.
So, did he do it? I want to talk to one person who says Avery is absolutely guilty and that Netflix performed a miscarriage of justice with this docuseries. She is the one and only Nancy Grace. Nancy Grace, what's fascinating, too, about your perspective, good to see you, is that you interviewed Steven Avery back in 2005 when he was still under investigation. Let's listen to that.
In this case, do you think you're being framed?
Yeah, I'm being set up because of my lawsuit and everything else.
Because of your previous incarceration, you're suing?
Yeah. And they set me up then.
Well, do you think it has anything to do with her car being found at your auto shop?
No. I think it's because of my name and what I went through from them.
Has the Netflix series, though, has that changed your opinion of all of this in any way?
Okay, no offense, but it doesn't matter what you or I or anybody else at Netflix or all the viewers think. It doesn't matter. What matters is what that jury thought. And no, the Netflix series has not convinced me that he is innocent. It has convinced me that there is bias in the media. They did what they thought would sell. I was there. I know the facts that were presented to this jury. Her blood is found on a bullet in his garage, a bullet that was absolutely fired from his gun. His blood is found in 6 spots in her vehicle. He told me out of his own mouth that she was there at his place, called over by him, although he star 67 his number and disguised who he was, for her to come take a photo there for Auto Trader. He had, on another occasion, come to the door wearing nothing but a towel. So she didn't want to go back, but she wanted to keep her job. So she went back to take the picture. That's the last time she's known alive. And not only that, possibly the most important is her bones, her charred bones, found intertwined in steel belts of tires out behind his auto salvage lot.
All right. I'm hearing all the details and the facts, but here's the but. You talk about bias, and then you have the other camp who's saying, well, hang on, the Avery family, they think that the small town cops in Manitowoc County, they had some sort of bias or vendetta against him. The county was about to pay a ton of money for his wrongful imprisonment lawsuit. Why not buy that?
The reason I am not buying that is because this so-called conspiracy would have to include lawmen, lawwomen, and prosecutors from 2 separate counties, Manitowoc and Calumet. How could they have done it? I mean, think through his theory. To do that, police would have to go and kill Teresa Hallback. They would have to be in on him calling her over the day she is murdered. They had a hand in that, and him disguising his identity. How would they place, and this is a very troubling aspect of the case, his sweat, not blood, not semen, not saliva, his sweat is found under the hood of her car. Now, how are police going to get his sweat and plant it under her hood? Her car found on his property?
Let me throw something else at you, though.
Okay.
What about how the film sort of, you know, without overtly saying it? I mean, there are all these examples about how this family, the Avery family, not totally even educated to understand their legal rights, sometimes don't know the difference between, you know, a cop and an attorney. Avery allows his property to be searched without first calling up a lawyer. What about that?
Okay, are you suggesting that because they don't have a law degree, that he can't commit a murder? Because that doesn't make any sense. That's a non sequitur. That does not follow. Maybe he doesn't have a law degree. Maybe he didn't go to college. But he darn well could commit a murder. And of course his family believes in him. What mother wouldn't believe her son that she loves? I would believe my son. It'd be over my cold, dead body. I would think that my son would do a thing like this. Of course they don't believe it.
Everyone is talking about this docuseries. There's one perspective from Nancy Grace. Nancy Grace, thank you so much. We watch Nancy.
Law enforcement despised Steven Avery. Steven Avery was a shining example of their inadequacies, their misconduct.
No one ever intended to do anybody any harm by this. We firmly believe that we had the guilty party at the time.
Welcome home. This was one of the biggest miscarriages of justice I ever saw in 20 years of criminal defense work and thousands of cases.
That was a clip from the Netflix series Making a Murderer that has gained a lot of attention and some criticism. The series tells the story of Steven Avery, the man on the left, and his nephew Brendan Dassey on the right. Avery was released from prison after serving 18 years for an alleged rape that he did not commit. Shortly after his release, Avery, along with his nephew, was arrested and convicted of murdering a different woman, Teresa Halbach. And now there are questions about whether he did that crime. Judge Janine Pirro is host of Justice with Judge Janine and a former Westchester County, New York District Attorney. The District Attorney. Judge, good to see you.
Good to see you.
There's such a movement now in this country to get him released from prison again. Just because he's a victim of the system once doesn't mean it happened again. And in fact, the odds of it happening twice, you tell me.
I don't believe in coincidence in these kinds of cases. But I have looked at this case, and there is evidence beyond a reasonable doubt that 12 jurors unanimously believed that this guy Avery killed the victim in this case, a 28-year-old woman. There's no question he called her. She was at his junkyard. She was there to take a picture. He said she left, but the only people to see her were the people who were at his place. Her bones are found near the house. Her DNA is on a bullet fragment in the garage with her blood. His DNA is under the hood of her car, which was removed and placed in a secret area of the junkyard. Look, there is evidence here. And Megan, it's like anything else. If you make a decision that you're only going to present one side of the story, everybody's going to start saying, oh my gosh, this guy is not guilty. I'd believe it too if I saw Netflix, which is why there are more than 200,000 people asking for this guy to be pardoned.
And this apparently started not as a documentary meant to be a fair and balanced presentation, but as a defense submission. And only when, this is what the prosecutor said, that only once Netflix got interested did they start to pepper in some more facts from the other side so it could appear balanced. But that does taint the piece a bit, does it not?
Well, it clearly taints the piece, because when you look at the evidence that was not presented in this documentary, as they call it, then you realize that what they did was try to sway their audience. This isn't a documentary. I don't believe it is a documentary. Where is the victim's family? Where is the, the sympathy for them? There's all kinds of sympathy for Avery and his family.
I asked him last night, the prosecutor, why, or the defense attorney, I asked him, how, if your guys didn't do it, why were her bones on the property? He said, we believe they were burned someplace else, and that the campfire they set in the backyard could not have burned the bones in that way.
Oh, that's hogwash. You can burn those bones the way they were burned, 20 feet from where this guy Avery lives. And to follow that line of reasoning, Megan, you would have to believe that the police, the prosecutors, the crime lab technicians in 2 different counties, remember there are 2 counties involved here, all got together and said, let's kill this 28-year-old woman and blame it on Avery, and let's move her bones from here to there, when everyone knows she was at that junkyard doing her job, that she had said to her boss, the guy gives me the creeps, I don't want to go back. She was afraid of him.
That he had called her.
He called her and he used *67 to cover up that he was calling her, and then calls her to make believe on a direct line that she never came and he was trying to get her there.
The other thing that is disturbing is his talk of torture, of building a torture chamber while he was in prison serving a wrongful sentence. We have the video? Let me see it. What video? Oh, of the handcuffs that were introduced at trial. I'm talking about his statement in jail that he wanted to build a torture chamber.
He described to other prisoners the fact that he had what he called a dream torture chamber. He actually drew it for another inmate of what he wanted to do to young women. He wanted to rape them and kill them. And isn't it interesting that here is a guy who gets a young woman, that he answers the door apparently, you know, with just a towel, and she's creeped out by him. He lures her to his property under the guise of, I need you to take a picture of one of the vehicles in my junkyard for this magazine to sell it. And she ends up burnt in his yard 20 feet from his house. Now, I don't believe in coincidence, and you've got a jury, you've got appellate courts, the highest court in Wisconsin, have all agreed that the evidence was solid, that the case was properly tried. And whether it's, you know, any one of a number of cases, you can claim anything, but it's about facts. And if there are new facts here, a court can certainly make a decision to reopen.
Governor Walker has said he does not plan on pardoning him, and that's where they need to go, to the governor. And the other thing is, before you petition to get somebody pardoned, don't you have an obligation? Go read the transcripts. Why don't you read the full confession? Take a deeper dive on your own into the facts of this case, as opposed to just taking, and I'm not disparaging the filmmakers, but before you ask for somebody to be let out of prison, you better be damn sure you're in support of that. Judge, great to see you.
Good to see you.
I want to talk about the parts of the case that the viewers are most angry about, particularly angry with me.
So, I can't wait.
It's been good sport. So, and the producer came out and told us all to calm down. So we will calm ourselves. Teresa, because it's a case that generates a lot of emotion.
Yeah. Yes.
And you're laughing at us before. Okay. Before the television show. All right. This part, I don't think this one looks pretty problematic to me. So let me have you guys chew on this.
Okay.
Teresa's car key was found in plain view on a bookshelf in Avery's bedroom. It had not been found during multiple prior searches of the home. Then Avery's DNA was on the key, but it was the only DNA on the key. Teresa's DNA was not on the key.
And found by an officer that wasn't even supposed to be there.
And it was the first time that officer who wasn't even supposed to be there, who had a history, who was also part of that $36 million lawsuit, who the very first time he was unsupervised, that time doing a sweep around the house, unsupervised, found the key with the blood when it is proven that blood was tampered with.
No.
No, it is proven, Dr.
Let's talk about that.
Okay, all right.
I'll go right to that if you wish.
Okay.
But let's go back to the key for a moment.
Okay.
This was not the first time that officer had been in there either. He'd been on multiple searches, and they were never supposed to be in there. They had been told not to be in there at all. So why were they even trying to be in there? Specifically, that officer who had been deposed and who was personally on the line in the civil lawsuit.
How do you defend that?
Yeah,
I think there's a problem.
Yeah, when you look at the photographs and where that key was found out there really in plain view, how was that missed by trained officers for all those other sweeps?
And where's her DNA? She'd had these keys apparently for years. Her DNA should have been all over that.
Is that true? I don't know anything about DNA preparation. If you're going to prepare it, you can get leftover DNA. There's no way they could have cleaned it off or something. He could have cleaned it off. Avery, anybody?
With his blood and then left it in the middle of the living room
He would
floor.
have cleaned his own DNA, is what you're saying. Good point. All right. Now, you brought up the vial of blood. Well, his blood was found in a torn package inside, his blood was found in the car. And they also found his blood inside a package in an unsealed box, leading some of you to believe, Sam included, that the blood was planted at the crime scene. But yesterday, I had Jim Clementian here, an expert. Look at how he explained how that blood is handled. First of all, before you go to it, one of the things they made a big deal of was that there was a prick.
I'm not concerned about the prick.
That's how blood goes. Listen,
I'm not concerned
that prick
about
is
that part.
every time you take a blood sample, you see those pricks.
I'm not concerned about that. I'm concerned about the seal being broken and that nobody signed in or signed out to remove that blood sample.
All right, here's an expert evaluating that. Here you go.
When they looked at the blood vial, and there was already a little poke in it.
That's how they get the blood in. That's how the blood goes in.
That's how they get the blood in.
There's always a mark like that whenever you draw somebody's blood. I was yelling at
I know there's a mark like that, but when it's ripped and everything like that,
all right, evidence tape like that is meant to be put on and ripped the first time it's tested. It has to be ripped. It cannot be taken off. So that means it was tested and properly ripped. Then, instead of putting more evidence tape on, they put cellophane tape. That's the problem with this case. They didn't put another piece of evidence tape and sign that and date it. That should have been done.
That's the problem.
Okay.
Okay, so it wasn't that somebody tampered with it or broke the tape. It was that they didn't follow procedure in resealing.
Oh, and you don't know if it was because it was being tampered or if they were going in there legitimately. But if they were doing it correctly, you always put another. There's levels of tape on there for every time they go in, and the person initials it and dates it, so they know every single person that's going in there.
Right. So
Darren will even.
Right. So
my defense attorney here will even agree with that.
But so it was either tampered or it was either incompetence or liar. With that, right? It could have been incompetence.
No, you're exactly right. Somebody went in there and did not follow the procedure, whether it was being tampered with or otherwise.
Right, so liar or incompetent on that one. So that has some wiggle room. The prosecutor claimed Teresa was killed either in Avery's bedroom or in his garage. None of her DNA, nor blood, nor hair, or skin, or anything was found in the garage nor in the bedroom, but it was found inside the car with lots of blood. But the issue of the bedroom, her blood in the bedroom was based on what the nephew reported.
Well,
the nephew
reported
that he cut her throat in the bedroom, and there was no blood anywhere in the bedroom. So that throws a real question on that kid's testimony, which we'll get into a little bit later. Or B, could he have cleaned all that up? Is it possible?
Dr. Drew, if he cleaned everything up with bleach, that would have erased his DNA too. His DNA, Steven Avery's DNA, was all over his house. The police claim that he killed her in his garage, but his DNA was everywhere, but not one speck of her DNA.
Except on the bullet.
Which was found 5 months later, Dr. Drew, 5 months later.
Promoting the ideas of true freedom and liberty, nonpartisan liberty for all radio with Dave Bourne.
And we are back. I can't stand Nancy Grace and Janine neither. Although for an older woman, she's not bad looking, but her personality just makes her very unattractive. But they're ignoring a whole bunch of other things as well. And I wanted to make sure that I saw any other evidence that they may have left out from the documentary or series or whatever you want to call it. And to address, well, first of all, I'll go through the evidence and we can address some of their points. But to address one of their points, I found out that there was an incident where he did answer the door or something in a towel, but that was, from what I understand, that whole thing was blown up, that she didn't want to go there or that she was scared to go there or anything like that. That was not the case. I don't know that it was her favorite place to go, but that was exaggerated a little. I do know that. But the evidence in this case isn't much. So you have a couple of things and which make no sense. So you have the car on the property. We talked about that. In the car, you have blood stains from her, the victim, Teresa, and you have, I think, 3 to 6 blood stains from Steven Avery. Now, first of all, I mean, just common sense, and that really doesn't mean anything because people do weird things, but you would think that, okay, this guy's about to get a big amount of money, move on with his life after being in jail for 18 years, and why would he all of a sudden just 3 weeks after a deposition, do something like this. Maybe he thought, hey, well, I could just say they framed me and I could easily get away with this. I don't know what was going through his head if he did do it, which I don't think he did because of a lot of reasons, and we'll get to those. So you have the car there and the blood in the car. That is the only blood that you have of hers anywhere. There was no blood of hers or DNA in the house. There was none even on her key they had mentioned. So you also had the Manitoba or I thought it was called Manitoba, but then it was spelled like Manitowac or something. But whatever it's called, I'll call them Manitoba. They actually, on the third to fifth time, the same officer who arrested him in the first case found the key not on a bookshelf, but the floor. Now, they say they moved the bookshelf, so it may have moved. It may have fell off of it or something. But first of all, what makes no sense is that if it's only his DNA on it, so that would mean that he scrubbed off all her DNA but left his on there, and that would really make no sense. So the other thing is that after searching the house multiple times and waiting for a chance to get that key in there, that's what it sounds like they did. That and the time that they actually got the key, the person that was with them was not told to watch what they were doing. The other times there was an officer from the other county that was told, make sure you watch what they're doing. So he probably saw an opening. Now, how he kept, and then I would think, well, how come he didn't have any DNA on it? Well, obviously, plastic gloves, and he wouldn't get any DNA on that. And why hers wouldn't be on there and his would. So that brings me, I guess, to my theory on what had happened. I think the cop, I can't recall his name, but he was the original cop that arrested the Steven Avery. I believe that he killed her. I do, because I think it's too much of a coincidence to think that she just happened to die right after that, and then there's the opportunity to frame him. And a lot of people right away would be like, no, a cop wouldn't do that and risk his career. And you had either Nancy Grace or Judge Janine saying, well, all these people would have to be involved. And no, they don't, actually. You only need one or two people involved in the whole thing, to be honest, especially if you're a cop. So what I think had happened is that he had the key because he got the key from her. He could have easily pulled her over somewhere. And if it was him and the other officer, and maybe it was, and cops kill people all the time, first of all, and we know that for a fact. Now, it's not usually, well, a lot of times it is an innocent person. So what's the fucking difference? Now, this is premeditated, so I guess there's a difference. But I believe that when you're talking about that much money and that they may be liable for some of that money, I honestly think that they would have done that. Now, how would they know that she was coming by? I don't know. They could have been monitoring his phones. they could have known from other people that had known she was coming by. So, or they could have actually stopped her, you know, after she left, knowing that she had just been there. Now, it's hard to sit there and put some theory together, and that's all this is. It's just a theory. But what if you look at what else could have happened? They claim that she was killed either in his trailer or in his garage. And they had also said, and I had not heard this, and I'm sure it's being exaggerated, but that he had drawn something in jail of some room or something. Whatever people do in jail, I wouldn't take too seriously, just because of the fact that maybe he was trying to impress people. Maybe he was trying to show people how nuts or crazy he is. When you're in and I don't know if it was maximum security, but it must have been up there. I don't think, you know, some people will say they're guilty just to scare people away. So if there was something that he drew in jail or said in jail, that to me doesn't really mean much. So the evidence that you have it's all evidence that was found by the same officer. So you have the key, you have the blood in the car, and I believe he was the first to get to the car, but it wouldn't matter if he was there before the fact. And that's the whole thing about knowing where the car is, where those women went right to the spot, and I think they were being directed by him. So he could have pulled her over. He could have killed her and put her in the back of the car. First of all, if they were going to kill her and bury the bones right there, why would they put her in the back of the car? So that's a fact that she was in the back of the car. It was a RAV4. So the very back, you know, like the back seat, or not back seat, but the way back there, that's where her blood was found. Like her head was leaning against the side there, or the corner there. So she was definitely put there. So she could have been put there. His blood, he did have a cut on his left hand. How that happened, I don't know. But they really didn't get into how much blood and how much was he bleeding that he could have got into if he did get that in the car. And same thing, it was, I believe, on the other side. So if it was on his right hand, it would have made more sense. But the officer could have got the blood after the fact, could have easily put that mark there and then put the blood in the back or wherever else in the car he wanted to put it, and then brought the car back to where they brought it back to late at night, especially how big that whole salvage place is. And that's on the other side, and left the car there, burnt the body someplace else, and had put the bones, and they didn't find all of them neither. From what I understand, there were 2 places where there were bones, but there weren't enough. There wasn't her whole body there. There was part of her head where they were able to somehow gather that she was shot in the head. So 4 months later, the same guy, the same officer from Manitoba or Manitowoc or whatever, they found a bullet 4 months later, a bullet fragment that supposedly had her blood on it. However, it should have been considered tainted because the person who tested it said that they might have got some of their DNA in it. Either way, they could have got her blood on the bullet and planted the bullet when he finally had a chance to get to the garage, because they had never found the bullet before and they had searched the garage, and also there was no other DNA in the garage. And as they had said, there was his DNA everywhere, but not hers. So it's not like everything was wiped down that got rid of all DNA. And it's not easy to get out blood stains, neither. So she couldn't have been killed in the house. She most likely couldn't have been killed in the garage. So she was shot in the head somewhere with his gun. Now, that could have been done after the fact. It doesn't necessarily mean that she was shot in the head with his gun. They could have took his gun, fired a bullet, and then took that bullet fragment and had put her blood on it. And that could have been way before that. Who knows at what point that was done, because they had the house for 8 days. So he could have done it at that point and then later planted the bullet there when he had a chance to. Because it's a big coincidence that this guy's finding all the evidence and they're finding it later when everyone else is going through stuff. It's not there. Then when he's there, it's there. So the other evidence that they had brought up that they said wasn't brought up in the actual documentary was, well, what about her cell phone and her PDA and all that stuff that was found in that pit? Well, he could have threw it, and I mean anybody could have threw it in that pit. So, and the bones could have been burned, as I said, someplace else and then brought over there. There was a guy who had actually called into another show who was there when the first crime happened in 1985 and actually tried to chase after the guy, but the police had stopped him because they didn't want him ruining the crime scene. But he was talking about how corrupt this sheriff's department was. And that's what I think is no one else is talking about, is that police are corrupt. Police do murder people, and they do a lot more as well. They frame people. They do whatever the fuck they want to do because they know they can get away with it. So this whole thing, and obviously they got away with it in this situation if that's what happened. So they're very cocky. They sit there and think that they can get away with anything. So no one's bringing that into this really at all. There's nothing I heard that, oh, well, the police, the police were involved. And if the police department is that corrupt, you had the fucking sheriff, the current sheriff, say, well, if we wanted to get rid of him, we wouldn't frame him. We would have just killed him. So who knows how far the corruption goes? It might not necessarily be the one guy. They could have had a couple people on this Maricopa County that helped in this whole situation. Now, the thing that, again, the reason why I think it would have had to have been the police if it wasn't Avery is because of the fact of it just seems like a big coincidence that, well, 2 weeks later, she just happens to die and they're able to, they have an opportunity to frame him. like that opportunity to frame him coming up seems like too big of a coincidence. Now, there was a video of her, and I might have mentioned this earlier, where she's talking about dying, and if she died, that, you know, let everybody know I died happy. And they said she was 28. I think she would have been 28 probably when the trial ended, but she was 25 from what I understood it in 2005. So she had made a video saying that. It was very strange, and that's where somebody had mentioned, well, what if she killed herself and then they didn't know what to do, or something along those lines. Now, this technically, I guess, could be another, but I think it would be too big of a coincidence. If she killed herself, the police found her and then set up a whole framing based off of that. But I honestly think, and this shows my opinion of police in general, that it's no big deal for police to kill people. And it's never been. You know, you talk about in the movie Casino, and I think this was in the book too, because I had read the book, that they talk about, well, even the coppers out here aren't afraid to bury people in the desert. You know, this whole idea that police are, you know, somehow these great people and high upstanding citizens is a bunch of bullshit. And it's not something that just started recently neither, where they started getting bad. And people forget that. They're like, oh yeah, the police just started getting bad and killing all these people. And no, they've been like that forever. If they wanted to get rid of somebody, they would get rid of somebody. And when you're talking about the potential of $36 million, that's not something to sneeze at. And them potentially being liable for it, those two officers. So if you take not just the arresting officer, and I don't have their I could look their names up, but I don't have them offhand, the names of the officers, but that they worked together to do this, knew she was going to be there, and killed her, set up the whole thing. Because it doesn't make sense. A lot of these things don't make sense. So, again, for one, where was she killed? Well, they don't know. And what was the murder weapon? Now, they say it was his gun, really a .22, because I believe it was a .22. So a .22, she was shot in the head, and that killed her alone. I guess point blank. But if you shoot somebody point blank, blood's going to splatter. So where did they kill her, and why? Why did he kill her? There's no motive. There's a motive for the police. There's a bigger motive for the police to kill her, and probably more evidence that I see against the police to kill her than there is for Steven Avery to kill her. Now, he had said he worked with her before. Like I said, it was exaggerated. Now, the other thing was that they found DNA under the hood. So, like, meaning he opened the hood. However, at the same time, there were no fingerprints. And if he was wearing gloves, I don't know how he would get DNA on it. So there's no fingerprints, but there's his DNA. And they called it sweat. But then the actual prosecutor said, well, it's actually like dead skin cells or something like that or whatever. And I would think there are ways to plant that as well. Or there's always the possibility that, you know, she needed something filled in her car or something, and he helped her out. I would assume he would say that. And as far as I know, there was no testimony regarding, oh, yeah, I opened the hood of the car to help her fill, you know, she was down some fluids or something, and I helped. But on the other side of that, why would he open the hood anyway? What would be the rationale there? So all we know is that she was in the back of the car, dead, I presume, bleeding from her head, and that his blood got in the car. And that's really the only evidence that they have, and that her bones were in this fire pit. Now, I don't know how a fire pit could burn the majority of her body, because not all the bones were there. So are we supposed to assume that the rest of the body burned in a fire pit? Would a fire pit even get that hot to burn through the majority of her body and the bones? I wouldn't think so. So I think that those were dumped there, and they didn't find them right away, so they had plenty of time to dump them there. And again, they were watching them, but they were looking for opportunities to slip away. So who knows? You know, at first, when they were getting it locked down in the first place. So the other thing is that the FBI all of a sudden comes up with this test that didn't exist before to test for this EDTA, which is a preservative that they use when they take blood. They said, oh, the blood that I tested in the car didn't have any in there. Well, it could have been that it didn't pick up, the test didn't pick it up, that the test wasn't tested enough. I don't want to use test in 2 times in a row, but that the test that they came up with it specifically for this trial. So they got it together fast. So how reliable can that be? Also, they didn't let the defense test anything with that or try to really refute that by testing it the same way. So, and I don't know about EDTA, how long that lasts, and that blood had been there for years. So who knows when it comes to that? I don't think that test can be reliable. Of course, the judge let it in. I don't believe they should have let it in. And just because they had made a point, it was Janine or the other one, Nancy Grace, that, well, you know, they go through the court system, the jury finds them guilty, they don't get any appeals. That doesn't mean anything. That just is how fucked up the court system is. Okay, I already went through the statistics for 2010, how many people are actually found not guilty. And it just happens to be that everybody that takes their case to trial, you know, 90% of them are guilty. They're just taking it to trial anyway, just hoping that, hey, I could take a deal, but I'm just hoping that maybe I'll get lucky here. No, it's the fucking system that is the issue. And the same with them not getting trials. So to say that, well, you were found guilty by a jury of 12 people, 12 fucking random people what does that even mean? And you have these people that are sitting there deliberating that just want to go home and just agree. You also have a juror that was dismissed supposedly because there was a family emergency or something, but I had read something that it wasn't as serious as they were told, and it suggested foul play. Who knows? But he said he would have voted not guilty. And that at the beginning or through most of the trial, 7 people were saying not guilty. So it just doesn't make a lot of sense in many areas here. Regarding the DNA on the key again, to me that would be they took the key, took everything off it when and he put got Steven's DNA on it before he planted it. Now, how he got his DNA on it from what exactly, I don't know, but I mean, you could take dried blood, and I don't even know if they, I don't know, or something that they've possibly, you're talking about if you're talking about shedded skin cells. I mean, if you can find DNA all over the place, can't it rub off on something else? So I don't know how he got his DNA on the key, but there's no doubt that her DNA would have been all over the key as well. So somebody washed that key and then he's got his DNA on it. Obviously, if he's smart enough to be able to get her DNA off the key, which why even bother? Well, I guess I was going to say why even bother, because they'd be able to match that key up. The other thing would be possibly, I guess they could have a key made and have a copy and put it in there, but I doubt that would be, you'd have to, that's the other thing, that where were most people have a key ring with keys on it. So somebody would have had to take the key to the car off the main set of keys. So what happened to the rest of the keys? And was that in the pit with the rest of the stuff? And maybe it was, but somebody would have had to do that as well. So the other thing is that I pretty much take any testimony of, there were 2 people. There were Brendan Dassey's brother, Robbie, who said, I believe he said he saw them outside together or something. And then there was his stepfather, who they both happened to go hunting, and their alibis for each other is they drove by each other on the road, which doesn't fit the timeline of the bus driver who saw her taking pictures of the car when she dropped them off, and that was 3:45. And that's a totally impartial witness. So she did see her taking pictures of the car. So what happens after that? He grabs her somehow. Nobody hears anything. And somehow he doesn't get her into her house. He doesn't get her into the garage. He throws her in her car and shoots her. But then you would have had bullet fragments in the car, obviously. None of it makes fucking sense. So, I mean, ultimately, what I think is these are just another bunch of fucking corrupt police officers. They've already proved that in their first case. Now, I'm not saying this guy is a great guy neither. He fucking lit cats on fire. But he's not guilty of, what it looks like to me is he's not guilty of murder. And I don't know why, if you were going to burn those bones, why you wouldn't get rid of them right away, and why you would burn them like right outside your house. Now, he's not that smart, yes, but he seems to be at least smart enough to know not to do something like that. So I want to get into the testimony of Brandon Dassey and what happened with him. But as far as Steven Avery, and the other thing is their testimony conflicts. So you have two cases for the same thing with conflicting testimony, which is ridiculous. And potential other suspects, people were talking about, well, it could be one of his brothers, it could be his other nephew or whatever. And, no one's going to say the police, but yes, I think it's the police. And you get screwed by the justice system as well. He got screwed by the justice system twice. Not only did he have to pay a ridiculous amount to try to get some kind of justice, but when you're in a courtroom, it's always in favor of the government. Once you get arrested, you are essentially, you lose, because no matter what happens, you still had to go through getting arrested, people's opinions about you, sitting in a jail cell. Depending on what you might be charged with, you might have to sit in a jail cell for a long time. You have to pay a lawyer, and most of the time you're not getting any of these things back. So even if you're found not guilty, look at what you had to go through. So if he was found not guilty, look at what he had to go through just to be found not guilty. There's no winning in this justice system. You're putting the whole case in one judge who's there to make decisions of what can be introduced and what can't. The appeals court usually just agree with the judges. They don't do shit, as far as I see it. It's not like, oh, you can just appeal it and don't worry about it. No, it's not like that. Just like the police that I have on the intro to my show say, just follow the police's orders and then take care of it in court. Because, of course, it's going to get straightened out in court, right? No, because they are all on the same side. It's all government. The police, the prosecutors, the judges, they're all colluding with each other. I'm not saying that the judge or the prosecutor were part of the framing, but they're still there to make sure that they find them guilty, whether they think they're guilty or not. It doesn't matter. It's not about the truth. It's about finding people guilty when they're charged with something. It's about winning and losing, and the state filling their prisons and them getting higher budgets for their jails and all of that, and the control of the government. It's a bunch of bullshit is what it is. So I'm going to play a little of this Brendan Dassey really, I don't even know if you can call it an interrogation. It's so fucked up. But I'm going to play a little of it and then talk about his part of it, which essentially, if he just didn't talk to the police, nothing would have happened to him. Let me go to, because this is like 56 minutes long, so obviously I'm not going to play the whole thing.
I think Mark and I want to look at what you said and listen to the tapes a little and stuff like that. Beefing in a way, just let you.
Let me start it here.
Absolutely.
Here, let me pause it and start it around the 6-minute mark, and we'll just play a little of this and then talk a little about his case, as we only have, we still have an hour left. So, of course, if you'd like to call in, we still have time, 702-470-7664. That's 702-470-7664. And you can Skype in Nonpartisan Liberty for All. Just send a contact request. So the reason I want people to hear this is because you can tell how this is a kid with, I think he has a lower IQ than 70. He's a scared 16-year-old. He even thinks, after telling them that he did all this stuff, like he helped kill her and stuff like that, because that's what they want him to say, that he's going to get to go home. So he's that stupid. And he thinks that they're there to help him. They already know what happened, and their version of what happened is not what actually happened, but he has to give their version of what happened, and if he does, he'll be okay and get to go home. If he doesn't, he'll be in trouble. And they make him think that, essentially, by the things that they're saying to him. And they're almost prompting him by saying, you can hear them saying, well, I don't believe that. Was it this? Did you do, what else did you do here? Did you do that? And it's almost like he's guessing what they want him to say. And they're trying to make him feel like, hey, we're your friends. We just need you to tell the story that we need told. And if you do that, you'll be fine. Which is this is what police do. They are pieces of fucking shit. So I'm going to play this clip right now. Check us out, nonpartisanlibertyforall.com.
I kind of call it, to a sense, debriefing in a way, just let you talk to us a little. And we've had also a chance for 2 days now to look at what you said and listen to tapes a little and stuff like that. And, we look at that and we say, well, Brendan honestly gave us this information, that information. Maybe I'll call them dots or whatever. And some of the dots, when we look at it, say, well, I think we need some matching up here, just a little tightening up or something. We feel that maybe, I think Mark and I both feel that maybe there's some more that you could tell us that you may have held back for whatever reasons. And I want to assure you that Mark and I both are in your corner. We're on your side. And you did tell us yourself that one of the reasons you hadn't come forward yet was because you were afraid. You were scared. And one of the reasons you were scared was that you would be implicated in this, or people would say that you helped or did this. Mm-hmm. Okay, and that you might get arrested and stuff like that, okay? And we understand that. One of the best ways to prove to us, or more importantly, the courts and stuff, is that you tell the whole truth. Don't leave anything out. Don't make anything up because you're trying to cover something up a little. And even if those statements are against your own interest, you know what I mean? That makes you, it might make you look a little bad, or make you look like you were more involved than you want to be looked at. It's hard to do, but it's good from that vantage point to say, hey, there's no doubt you're telling the truth, because you've now given the whole story. You've even given points where it didn't look real good for you either. And I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. And that's when we kind of came here, to let you talk a little, maybe get some stuff off your mind or chest if you need to, and then to tell us the whole truth, to take us through this whole thing that happened on Monday, not leaving anything out, not adding anything in, because Mark and I looked at the tapes, looked at the notes, and it's real obvious there's some places where some things were left out, or maybe changed just a bit to maybe looking at yourself to protect yourself a little. From what I'm seeing, even if I fill those in, I'm thinking you're all right. Okay, you don't have to worry about things. We're there for you, and we know what Steven did, and we know kind of what happened to you and what he did. We just need to hear the whole story from you. And as soon as we get that, we're comfortable with that. I think you're going to be a lot more comfortable with that. It's going to be a lot easier on you down the road. If this goes to trial and stuff like that, we need to know that, because it's probably going to come out. Think of Steven for a second. Steven is already starting to say some things, and eventually he's going to potentially lay some crap on you and try and make it look like you are the bad person here. And we don't want that. We want everything out front so we can say, yeah, we knew that, Steven. He told us that. You get my drift? I don't know if Mark has something, so I'm just going to give you an opportunity to talk to us now and kind of fill in those gaps for us.
Honesty here, Brendan, is the thing that's going to help you. Okay, no matter what you did, we can work through that. Okay, we can't make any promises, but we'll stand behind you no matter what you did. Okay, because you're being the good guy here. You're the one that's saying, you know what, maybe I made some mistakes, but here's what I did. The other guy involved in this doesn't want to help himself. All he wants to do is blame everybody else. Okay, and by you talking with us, it's helping you. Okay, because the honest person is the one that's going to get a better deal out of everything. You know how that works. Mm-hmm. You know, honesty is the only thing that'll set you free, right? And we know, like Tom said, we know we reviewed those tapes. We know there's some things you left out, and we know there's some things that maybe weren't quite correct that you told us. Okay, we've been investigating this a long time. We pretty much know everything. That's why we're talking to you again today. We really need you to be honest this time with everything. Okay, if in fact you did some things which we believe some things may have happened that you didn't want to tell us about, it's okay. As long as you be honest with us, it's okay. If you lie about it, that's going to be problems. Okay, does that sound fair? Mm-hmm. All right. Should we just go through that whole day again on the 31st, or how do you want to do it?
We can do. I try to give him a chance to just talk to us. And
sure.
If he wants to go through the whole day, if he wants to fill in the pieces, that's up to Brendan right now.
What would you rather do?
You just want to talk to us and tell us, starting with that day.
So I'm going to stop it right there. I just wanted to, I want to try to play a couple clips where they're actually questioning him and the things they're doing, because what they're doing is essentially almost feeding him information to say this and saying, no, we know when you're lying, and kind of saying that they're saying, well, we know everything already. So one, he's stupid anyway. He's 16 years old. And he's thinking, these guys are telling him, well, Will, as long as you tell the truth, our truth, essentially, and you tell us what we want to hear, then you'll be okay. You won't get in any trouble and nothing will happen to you. You just need to tell us the truth that we want to hear. And as long as you do that, that's fine. And as he starts talking, if he doesn't say something that they don't want to hear, then they totally say, well, that doesn't sound like it happened, and we think you're lying. And what about this? Did they, he gets specific. Well, what about the head and what happened there? What about what happened here? That's not what happened. This is really what happened, right? So they basically fucked this kid all up. If he just didn't talk to the police, he would be fine. He ends up getting, I think, 40-something years before he can get parole. And they charge him with mutilating the body, because even though there's no DNA in the house, right, they get him to make up this story that she was in the house, that he was forced to rape her and cut her throat based on what his uncle told him, and that he gets charged with that, with sexual assault, I believe, and rape and mutilating a body, and gets found guilty. as well as getting found guilty of first-degree murder, because he makes up this story and thinks that he's going to be okay. Even at the end, he thinks he's going back to school after he tells them that he cut this woman's throat and raped her. He thinks he's going back to school. So they're obviously dealing with a kid who doesn't know what the fuck is going on, and they're planning these stories in his head. I would even say, based on his intelligence and based on a court of law, I mean, is he even liable? Not liable, but I mean, could he even stand trial? So what happened was, he finally said, well, I didn't do these things, and he told his mother, and he ended up going to trial because he's like, well, I told them this, and then they told me everything would be okay, and they got in my head, and so he ends up going to trial and gets found guilty. And you have this kid that all he had to do, they have nothing, and they say this in the trial, and this is why they don't say really much about him in any of these clips, because they're saying, well, Avery's guilty and whatever, because there's no physical evidence from him at all. Nothing. The only thing that they have on him is what he said. That's it. Not only that, is you have his original lawyer, first of all, isn't there during questioning, actually kind of sets him up with his investigator. So the lawyer has an investigator, and the investigator doesn't believe him and tells him, oh, you have to admit this and this. So he does kind of the same thing with the investigator and fills out a thing and signs it, and then does the same thing. The police say, oh, well, your lawyer said you wanted to see us. The lawyer isn't even present, and then they go through the same shit again, as far as at first he's like, I didn't do anything, but then they get into all that same stuff. He ends up admitting that he did all these things that he didn't do, that there's no physical evidence, there's nothing that proves any of this, or even not proves, but even points in that direction. Nothing. So essentially, they put a kid in jail for most of his life based on getting some ridiculous confession of, I mean, his story kept changing because he didn't know what to say. Now, I mean, normally you would say, well, that's kind of on him. But look at what the fucking police do. And they realize that what they're dealing with. They're not stupid. The police, I mean. They know, these investigators know exactly what they're doing. And they know exactly what they're doing to this kid's life. But they don't give a fuck. Because that's their job. Is what they wanted to do initially was, okay, we want to get somebody to testify against Steven Avery, and that's what their goal was. But because everything was so inconsistent and none of the evidence would have backed it up, so they didn't charge Steven Avery with mutilating a body. They didn't charge him with rape. At first, after Brandon's confession, they added the 3 charges. All those charges ended up getting dropped because there was nothing to support them. Nothing. So they essentially ruined this kid's life. You know, talking about being able to sleep. I mean, can these guys fucking sleep? And I tried to look up the crime statistics in this area, and I couldn't find anything that solid, but it doesn't seem like an area where murder happens that often at all. So I don't know if this is their first murder investigation or if they've had one before. They haven't had many. So this is a big thing. You know, hey, we get to investigate a murder. You know, and again, they could have came from another part of the country as well and been in homicide or something like that. But this, at least from what I looked at, and again, it wasn't the most reliable website I was looking at because it was just giving for specific dates and showing, you know, icons on the map type thing. But from what I understand about that region anyway, that it's not someplace that's that dangerous where there's murders happening all the time. It's not Chicago or something where they're investigating a murder every fucking day. So I would think that they would be excited. Oh, look, you know, a murder. So he gets screwed over not only by the police, but by his initial lawyer who gets appointed to him, who's a real douchebag. And I guess he was running for, I don't know if he was running for state office or federal, but he had mentioned how he was running for something and he came in third or something like that. He's a real politician type. And he kind of fucked up his case. That's not enough to get him a new trial. But the prosecutor said, well, based on all the evidence we have, all the other evidence, you know, that points to this. And again, they had none. The other thing they had was his cousin. And the only thing that supposedly he said to his cousin that she retracted was that he said he saw body parts in the fire. That's what his cousin said. Then his cousin said that no, she had lied, that she was mad at him or something, and he had never said that. So that was another thing that didn't help him. However, that's all it was. It wasn't anything to do with any other stuff that happened. So again, there was nobody to collaborate or no evidence or no nothing that he had cut her throat and raped her and all that stuff, because there was no DNA evidence of her even being in the trailer at all. And this is after 8 days of them, you know, I'm sure that if they had the chance, they probably, the sheriffs from the other county would have tried to drop some blood in there or something too. Maybe they didn't have it to do at the time, or whatever blood they used, they used it up. But this is, I mean, his case is sadder than Steven Avery's case in a lot of ways, because, you know, partially you look at it like, hey, this kid's an idiot, but he was still a kid who just didn't know any better. And he's going to spend, you know, the majority of his life in jail just based on what he said and being tricked by the sheriffs. So let me see if I can get to some of the testimony where they're kind of, you know, like prompting him. It's almost like he's trying to guess what the right answer is.
And how you actually came to know what happened and stuff. Because now we know you were in the garage and stuff, apparently cleaning up and stuff. So tell us about that.
Well, he was working on his car, and like he did something wrong, and then like he poked a hole in like something and then it started leaking. And then later on, because I was helping him before I went over there a little bit.
Yeah, I know.
And later on, I helped him move the car out of there and cleaned it up. And then I went back home, and then later on I got a call from him, and he wanted me to come over.
Let's go back a little bit, okay? When did you first go over by Steve?
At like 9 o'clock.
You said you were over in the garage helping him.
Yeah.
When was that?
Like 6:30.
Okay. So let's go back, okay? Let's go back to around that time. You get home off the bus at about 3:45?
Yeah.
And what do you do? Now you got to be honest here.
I walked on the road and I go into my house.
Okay.
And
what did you see at that time?
That she was talking, or her car was over there.
Where was her car?
Like on the other side, you know, where you drove by our house, where you turned there. It was like on the other side of the road there, by the trees.
And you just said something. You said she was talking, and then you stopped. Now, remember, this is very important because we already know what happened that day, okay? Let's just be honest here, okay, Brendan? Let's get this out.
Use your memory, not what Steven told you, not what anyone else told you. Be honest, because we're gonna be able to tell when you're not being honest.
See, they keep doing that. Like, we already know what happened that day. Be honest. We're gonna know when you're not being honest. And he thinks like, hey, if I just give them what they want, even though it's not true and it's not honest, I give them what they want and I'm good and I can just go back to school and I can be away from this shit. Now, he should know, and people should be fucking taught this. Of course, schools don't want to teach it to you because the schools are run by the government, that he doesn't have to talk to them at all. But no, it's fucking, he talks to them anyway.
I'm telling you that right now. So you're walking down the road, let's pick it up again, okay?
I seen him talking to her on his porch and that, and I seen her Jeep there, and I walked in the house.
So she's standing, meaning she is Teresa?
Mm-hmm.
Did you recognize her?
Not at first.
You just knew it later on when this all came out?
Yeah.
So she's standing on his porch.
Mm-hmm.
Did Blaine see that?
I don't think.
So the truth is that he never seen any of that, and just from them going back and forth, it finally gets to, okay, well, I'm going to say, you know, what do I say to please them so they'll just leave me alone? We have with us Katie Reyes, who's our professional voiceover girl, who's trying to get her mic working. Katie, is your mic okay?
No, it is not.
Okay. So we'll have to get that fixed. Usually we do that before the show, but I don't know if we're gonna let's play some more of this, and I want to get to a couple more things as well. Actually, I'm not sure if I do have something with his lawyer, so we'll play this clip from the lawyer and see what information that he gives. But this is basically just an interview with his lawyer, so we'll go to that for now, and we'll be right back after this. NonpartisanLibertyForAll.com.
And we've got Mark back. Mark, it's unusual, I think, that you and Ray, being competitors and both being highly respected criminal lawyers that would like to have the better cases, one of you or the other of you. How did you end up being a tag team in this case?
It's interesting story. The state had called and had indicated that they had some difficulties finding an attorney for Brendan and asked if I would represent Brendan in Manitowoc County. And I had asked if I could get some assistance, have a co-counsel. And they indicated that they would provide a certain amount of funds for that. I could pick whoever I wanted to be co-counsel. So I contacted Ray and told him about the case and that I'm willing to take it and the state said they're willing to give me some money for co-counsel if he wants to help out. And he had said, well, let me think about it and I'll get back to you. I think literally 30 minutes later, the news stations got wind of it and were at my office with cameras and asked if I'd go on camera. And I said, sure. So I go on camera and they asked if I'm representing Brendan Dassey. And I said, yeah, myself and Ray Edelstein are representing Brendan Dassey. So Ray was now stuck. He couldn't try to weasel out now.
Well, obviously you work very well together. You respect each other's abilities, and I know the court respects both of you greatly. How did you divide the responsibility during the trial?
We actually, beforehand, what the decision was that Ray would focus on much of the confession. In our case, it was a little different than Steven Avery. We had to come up with a theory of defense that kind of focused on this confession. So our theory of defense that kind of permeates throughout the entire voir dire, opening, questions of the officers and witnesses in closing was essentially that Brendan didn't do this, Steven Avery did it, and that his confession shouldn't be believed. It was suggested to him by the police. And so Ray's focus was on a number of, there were 4 or 5 different either tape recorded or videotaped confessions or statements, I think it's better to refer to them as. And so Ray focused on that, focused on how the questions were asked, and then my focus was on the other side of the case, the scientific evidence, dealing with some of the cross-examination of the state's witnesses and dealing also with our client and our expert, the doctor that we hired.
And then you divided the final argument as well?
Correct. It was nice. The judge allowed us to divide it up as long as we didn't try to rehash what the other one had brought up. So in closing, we focused, if you watch the closing, it was exactly the same way as we had set apart our separate duties. Ray focused entirely on the confession. I focused entirely on the lack of evidence that the...
You are listening to Nonpartisan Liberty for All Radio with your host, Dave Bourne.
Sorry about that. We are back. Actually, that clip had a delay in it. I was like, what the hell happened? Because it totally went blank because the beginning of that clip had a delay in it. But we are now here with the person who did that voiceover. Katie Reyes is with us, and I think we have her mic working okay now.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you had watched the series as well, and I know you had some comments about it. So I'll just let you go and, whatever you want to comment on specifically, you can comment on.
Well, I was going to discuss about a number of things that I saw, watching the series. But then I was listening to a show earlier and something stood out. What's the name of that lawyer that has that show? What's her name? The blonde lady?
Nancy Grace.
Nancy Grace, yeah. She mentioned that they found his sweat under the hood of her car. I didn't hear that in the series.
Yeah, because they didn't mention it. So there's a couple things that they didn't mention in the series, and that's what they were saying, like, oh, it wasn't fair because they didn't mention a few things. but you can't actually get sweat. So it's really like skin fibers or whatever. So I don't know, and I don't trust what the prosecutor says anyway, because that's kind of what he said. So whether or not you can plant, I'm sure you can, that there would be a way to do that. The other thing was, I was thinking maybe he helped her with something or looked at something under the hood, but I would think that he would have said that. So,
well, even before I heard that comment by Miss Nancy Drew, I was even thinking to myself,
Nancy Grace.
Oh, Nancy Grace, Nancy Drew, that's so funny. I was thinking to myself, even let's say he was guilty. I think that they really botched this trial with planning evidence, because it's obvious. Had they not planned the evidence, I think it would have shown whether he was, guilty or not. Just let the police do their job. There's no reason to plant evidence. If he was guilty, he was guilty, and they probably could have done a lot better trial, without planning that evidence. And I think what they did is what they really did was screw up either reasonable doubt or, the chance to say, well, he is guilty. Because now, because I hear little things like that, information about DNA being under the hood of her car. I mean, why was that there? And why didn't he mention that? And I'm thinking to myself, now I'm doubting his guilt, because of all that planted evidence. I cannot deny why, now it just looks like a horrible investigation. And the part that disturbs me the most, aside from, the blood, there's no DNA in her car, the small amount of his blood. I'm trying to recall the part where I don't remember his name, but one of the officers, how he was calling in her license plate, and he described the make and model of her vehicle.
Yeah, I totally forgot about that. That the officer, had called in the license plate, and the license plate wasn't on the car. That's why I honestly think that either one of those officers or the two, or maybe even more, actually colluded and killed her and planted all the evidence, because I think it's too much of a coincidence that somebody else would have happened to kill her right after she left where he was at. It's too much of a coincidence. The other thing that somebody had mentioned was a possible suicide because of that video. I don't know if you remember the video where she had said, well, if I die now, I want everybody to know that I died happy. Do you remember that?
I recall that. I didn't think of the suicide possibility. I came up with the possibility she somehow died. She was either killed by somebody else or it was a horrible accident and the police found her and they had this vendetta against this guy. So I think they said to themselves, we're going to frame this guy. We're going to pin this on this guy, and this time there's going to be no doubt. He's not going to get away with it. Now, if she did, I don't buy that that she killed herself, because how can you deny the blood that was in the back of her car, like she was transported? And I'm thinking to myself, also, how could they think that Steve Avery killed her? Because there's absolutely no blood in his house, in his garage, no fibers, nothing. And that bullet, they didn't go into detail how that bullet was lodged. Where was it, in the wall?
Yeah, it was like on the floor, but it was found 4 months later. It wasn't there, and it was found by the same officer. So there's no doubt that was planted as well.
And another thing,
because it was 4 months later, found by the same officer.
Because I used to watch forensic shows when I was a kid, so many times. And what I recall is when a bullet is fired, they can determine the bullet specifically is how's the phrase? It's uniquely identified to the gun that it was fired
from. Well, they
from.
did tie it back to his gun. So it was fired by his gun, but that doesn't mean anything neither.
Yeah, because the casings could have been there.
They had the opportunity to take his gun and fire a bullet out of it.
That's true.
So that's the whole thing, is that they had all those opportunities to do a lot of those things. So just because it was fired out of his gun,
that's another thing. If he had shot her, there would be blood, like fragments. There would have been spatter, droplets. The tragic thing is I do consider evidence that points to the possibility of him killing her. But all this other evidence just creates, not that he's innocent, because that we'll never know. But all this planted evidence, it creates reasonable doubt. I doubt him being guilty. And I'm very surprised that those jurors found him guilty. Now, another theory that I had, because the juror that was leaning towards, him being innocent, there was an emergency with his relative. I had this crazy, far-fetched idea. What if the police was involved in his relative's accident, to get him out of there?
That had actually come up, that it said something about his daughter dying, but his daughter was in a car accident. So yeah, that I forget where I had come across that, but that had actually come up.
Yes, and then that juror said he was leaning towards finding him not guilty by reasonable doubt.
They said at one point 7 jurors were looking at finding him not guilty.
I remember that. I just my thoughts were, even with all the evidence planted, even with all the possibility, to create reasonable doubt, I think the system still failed Steven Avery. The system itself, there was no. I just don't. I doubt his guilt. Not that I doubt his innocence. It could go either way, but I'm leaning towards. I just think that they really botched this investigation.
Isn't it the system that fails the majority of people? I don't know if you heard the statistics I gave at the beginning.
No, I didn't catch that part.
About 95% of people plead out, first of all, because, they scare people, they stack charges, they do all these things. And then out of that, and this is 2010 statistics, only 13% of people were found not guilty. So,
and I also, that makes sense, because even watching this series, I feel like the judge himself already thought Steven Avery to be guilty.
Well, they do that with everybody.
And sometimes I wonder, my goodness, he's supposed to be, the judge, that expression, he's supposed to be Switzerland. He's supposed to be on both, not on both the prosecutor and the defense, but he's supposed to be a fair party. And I just felt he wasn't.
But did you have any doubt before this that that's how it worked anyway, based on the knowledge that you have?
Until recently, and it was when you and I got together and I went with you to your court. I used to think, the judges are fair. And then had I not seen it with my own eyes, now I realize, these judges, they are on the system side, the prosecutors. They just want
part of that system.
But they're not supposed to, and that was my impression. That's how I thought things were, and I realized they're not. And it's just tragic that these judges, they don't have, a fair mentality. They're not honorable. They're supposed to be called honorable judge.
Your
fair.
Honor. How do you sorry to interrupt, but how do you get other people to see that? Because you being a person that used to think, yeah, they do pretty much that the system works how it's supposed to, and you're learning more and more that no, it doesn't. How do you get other people to not just look at this trial? Because the way the presenting of it, this is just one trial, whatever. But how do you get people to actually realize that, no, this is how it is, that this is a corrupt system. It's not even that it's a corrupt system. It's the system, the way it's created is fucked up. There isn't justice. It's justice for the government. It's not even justice for the government. It's just whatever the government wants.
There was a quote that I saw on Facebook today, and I can't remember. It was quoted by one of the founding fathers, and I don't know it verbatim, but it was basically saying to create, the end of the quote was to create tyranny. The key behind tyranny is to create ignorance. God, I wish I could bring it up, but the key to something about freedom, you have to promote intelligence or something. And I think what the problem is with America and the world is, and you've said this, all along, that they create all these distractions. They create things that are not important, and those people value those things that are not important. For example, reality TV shows like, what's that stupid something with the Real Housewives of whatever, or, The Real World, or, all this entertainment that people are just so focused that they can't get enough of it. It's like a drug. And, ironically, when I was a kid, I couldn't stand these shows. I said, why are these so popular? They're so stupid. They're so dumb. And, I think I loved entertainment as far as like comedy. And yes, I don't know if it was intended to be a distraction, but, it's kind of like, the comedy shows that I liked, it was, people who like things like theater or art, it was just a form of entertainment, but I couldn't believe, all these ignorant programs, because the shows I watched were, had some sort of intellectual comedy behind them, but all this other stuff that people are so concerned with, and now it's like the Kardashians, and I don't even know a lot of other shows that are out there, but some people value all this stuff so much. And even Facebook, people are just, people are attracted to things that are quick, because people rarely go in the depth of things. And I think that's why articles get so neglected. People don't want to read that. People don't have time for that. But what does get attention are those, and I don't even know if I pronounce this correctly, memes or memes. I don't know what memes. So I think, to catch people's attention are, those quick headlines, those quick, phrases and stuff. But
that's a problem too. I mean, that's something that the government kind of wanted to happen, because they don't want people to have an attention span, just like they scroll scores across the bottom.
Well, I just think that whatever's going on, however it plays, things will eventually fall. It is tragic where we are today, but remember, when every, empire rises, it eventually falls. And I don't know if that's their purpose. Like, for example, you've even talked about one world government. They all want to be in it together, because no one, empire can rule it. It'll eventually fall apart. And people, this is a world now. I've always said people just want to live their lives, and that's another reason why people aren't paying attention.
Well, one world government is worse, because you got one empire that's being controlled by a small amount of people. But we only have like 10 minutes left, so I wanted to get your opinion on his nephew. So what are your thoughts on him, especially with the fact that, one, the two cases didn't even go together because they didn't even charge Steven Avery with the same stuff that the other one, his nephew, said he did. And there was no physical evidence, no anything. The only evidence that they had was him telling them.
Well, that, you know what? I get upset just thinking about what happened to that poor boy. Even when I was watching the show, I kept thinking to myself, where is the mother? How did they get permission to talk to this kid without the mother's presence?
Well, they didn't.
So, and just the way they talked to him, I do not. And I thought to myself, why did his confession, why didn't it get thrown out? Because it's clear that they were asking these questions. It was clear that this kid was guessing the answers. How could they even consider his confession valid? And what that other guy did when his court-appointed attorney brought in that other, what was it, an investigator?
It was the attorney's investigator. Most attorneys have investigators that will go and like investigate and interview people and stuff.
Why was that even accepted? I just think they had no chance. I think that these are people, they're like, we don't care about them. We're just going to find them guilty. We don't care how ridiculous this is.
Well, they don't care about anybody.
I know.
That's the whole point, is the government can do whatever they want. The judges can do whatever they want. So it's like obvious, well, why didn't they throw this out, or why didn't they throw that out, or why didn't they give them a new trial? And it's because the government doesn't want to deal with it. They're like, hey, we want to be done with this case. You're guilty. We don't give a fuck about you. You're going to jail, and that's it.
I just couldn't believe before my eyes, the things they were saying. And why was it so important for these officers? Do they not have a conscience, to tell this boy these, interrogate him the way they did? Just had no heart, just heartless. And I just feel so awful because it was like there was no hope.
What was your thought of, and I played some of the interrogation. Of course, I can't play the whole thing because it's like, hours long. But what was your thought of the part where he actually asked them about going back to school after he's told them that he cut a woman's throat and raped her?
I don't really remember in detail that part, but I do vaguely remember. And again, I said it was just tragic. They're heartless because they know, they know that he was going to jail after just confessing. Why wouldn't they just tell the boy, you've just confessed to some stuff. You're not going home. You're going to go to jail. And did they tell him that? No, they're like, oh, we'll get you, not exactly word for word, but we'll be wrapped up soon.
Yeah, but they finally did. And they said, after you just admitted to all this, where you're going, right? But they didn't do it from the beginning because obviously
they confess.
Right. They wanted to get that information. But let that be a lesson. I mean, I don't think most people are going to get caught in a situation like that. But if he didn't speak to the police, he wouldn't be in jail right now.
And also remember the other nephew who claimed that he saw.
He must have lied.
That was a complete lie. And why? Why did he lie? Why did he? The little girl, the niece.
Well, at least she had come back and in court admitted that she lied, but all she said was that he said he saw body parts in the fire pit. That was it.
And she said she made it up, and that was just awful because then it just looks like she feels guilty because her relatives are going to jail, and she's just trying to save her relatives' butt. But
right,
I just think everything was just so tragic.
But I think it shows how corrupt juries are. They just follow judges' instructions. And I gave you those percentages, like 13% of people that go to trial are actually found not guilty. But anybody that watches those videos, and they have played those videos in court, I don't know how they can't see how they totally manipulated everything. Not only that and they might not have had knowledge of the other trial, but they obviously in the first trial, that's not their version of what happened. But in this trial, it is the version of what happened.
And also, I mean, the way they tampered with the evidence, you know, they ruined the chance. Let's say this was done by someone else. You know, someone else got away with this tragedy, and we'll never know, because that, you know, trail went cold. And I think it is so ridiculous. Even if he did do it, I still get doubt with why would he leave her car in perfect condition in plain view when he had the resources to destroy, you know, the vehicle? Why would he leave, you know, her bones where someone could find them? He could have burned them to the point beyond, you know, that they could, you know, even find out that they belong to her bones. The whole thing makes me... Right,
well, that's where, because he probably didn't do it. Even with, like, the small evidence where he's possibly guilty, all this other circumstances and evidence makes me, you know, create reasonable doubt that he didn't do it. And I don't know. I just think it's a tragic story. And I remember they said something in the documentary. They interviewed his lawyers later, and they said, in what possibility could this man be exonerated? And they said, in the very same way the first time he was exonerated from the crime that he did not commit, that he was found guilty. If they were able to test, for example, that blood they found in his car, if they were to somehow figure out, you know, if there was that, what was that preservative in blood, ETC or something? EDS, HT or something.
Something.
Actually, I have it written down.
Or if someone else were to confess, or I don't know. But it's such a tragedy.
EDTA is what it is. So we only got about 2 minutes left. So anything else you want to say on the case before we go?
No, I believe that's all I can really think about.
Do you think it's possible that the police committed the murder?
I don't think they killed her. I don't think they're killers. I think they just had this vendetta against him.
I mean, they kill over like 1,100 people.
Well, yeah, but in this case, with everything that happened, you know, they had a vendetta against him, and they saw an opportunity and they took it. That's what I feel. We'll never know. You know, I don't want to say, oh yeah, they killed it. No, bottom line, I don't know. Is it possible?
But do you think it's possible that the police killed him?
I mean, it's possible, but my opinion is that's not the case. I think they just saw an opportunity and they took it, and it worked for them.
Well, that's all the time we have for tonight. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Thanks to Katie Reyes for joining us. And we will be back next Tuesday. Damn, it's Thursday already. So we'll be back next Tuesday. So hopefully everybody will be tuning in. You can listen to the archives immediately following the show on YouTube, Spreaker, and SoundCloud, as well as Tumblr. So go ahead and check those out. Thanks, everybody.
The way the system was meant to be. Comply with the orders of police officers. Resisting arrest is a real and dangerous crime.